girl went missing at the county fair. Her bracelet was found locked in an empty storage unit. The last night of the 1994 county fair. The air was thick with the mingling scents of caramel corn and diesel fumes as Maggie Collins stepped off the Ferris wheel. Her laughter faded into silence when her gaze landed on something or someone in the distance. She hesitated, clutching her denim jacket tighter around her slim frame. The fairgrounds buzzed behind her, but she felt suddenly untethered from it all. Maggie turned away from the lights and noise, walking toward the shadowy edge of the property where rows of parked cars sat like sleeping beasts under flickering lampposts. A figure moved there, just out of sight. She paused for a moment, glancing back at the bright carousel one last time before stepping into the darkness and vanishing forever. For 28 years, no trace of Maggie had ever been found. No body, no ransom note, nothing. Just whispers that swirled through town like ghosts haunting its collective memory. Evelyn Harper sat alone in her kitchen, sunlight streaming through lace curtains onto the worn oak table. At 72, she still took pride in her little house on Maple Street, though it felt emptier now without George, who had passed 3 years ago. The ticking clock above the stove seemed louder than usual today. When the mail arrived, Evelyn shuffled to the mailbox with deliberate care, leaning slightly on her cane. Among bills and flyers was an envelope addressed simply to Evelyn. No stamp, no return address. Curious, she opened it right there on the porch. Inside was a small brass key and a folded slip of paper. Her hands trembled as she read the note. "You always believed Maggie wasn't gone. Prove it." A chill ran down her spine. Maggie Collins, the girl who disappeared so many years ago. Evelyn had known Maggie well. They weren't close friends, but Evelyn had babysat her once or twice when Maggie was younger. That night at the fair haunted everyone in town, but for Evelyn, it had become more personal over the years. She'd never accepted the idea that Maggie might be dead. The key bore no markings, but Evelyn recognized it immediately. A standard self-storage unit key. There were only 2 facilities within driving distance of their sleepy town. One was inside city limits, too public for anything clandestine. The other, however, was tucked along the outskirts near Highway 17, surrounded by fields of wildflowers and forgotten things. She grabbed her purse and keys, ignoring the voice in her head, telling her not to get involved. This could mean answers. Closure, even. By late afternoon, Evelyn pulled into the gravel lot of Safekeep Storage, a place she hadn't visited since helping George clear out his hunting gear years ago. Rows of identical metal doors stretched before her, each numbered neatly in black paint. Holding the brass key tightly in her palm, she walked until she reached Unit 14B. The padlock clicked open with surprising ease, as if waiting for her. With effort, she slid the heavy door upward, revealing a dimly lit interior filled with dust motes dancing in the fading sunlight. Inside sat a single rusted metal box, about the size of a shoebox, perched atop a stack of yellow newspapers. Evelyn knelt awkwardly, wincing at the ache in her knees, and pried the lid open. There, nestled among scraps of fabric and old receipts, lay a silver friendship bracelet. It shimmered faintly despite the grime coating its surface. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She'd recognize it anywhere. It belonged to Maggie. On impulse, Evelyn flipped the box over, searching for any clues. Nothing. No name, no explanation. Just the bracelet, taunting her with its presence. Who would send this? And why now, after nearly 3 decades? As she stood there, clutching the bracelet like a lifeline, Evelyn realized this discovery wasn't just about solving a cold case. It was about confronting the past she'd buried alongside Maggie's memory. Someone wanted her to dig deeper, and she couldn't ignore the pull anymore. But who else knew what secrets lay hidden in those shadows? And how far would they go to keep them buried? Evelyn spent the night staring at the bracelet, its tarnished silver catching the moonlight that seeped through her bedroom curtains. Memories of Maggie tumbled back into focus. Her bright smile, the way she always wore her hair in a messy braid, how she'd laugh too loudly at nothing in particular. Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just some cruel prank. Someone had gone to great lengths to send her this key, to bring her here. By morning, she knew exactly where to start looking for answers. Lena Monroe. Lena ran the local library, but more importantly, she was the unofficial keeper of town secrets. If anyone could make sense of the anonymous storage unit, it was her. Evelyn arrived at the small brick building just after lunchtime, the smell of old books and coffee welcoming her like an old friend. Lena looked up from behind the circulation desk, adjusting her glasses with a knowing smile. "Evelyn Harper," she said warmly, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need your help," Evelyn replied without preamble. She slid the rusted box across the counter along with a copy of the rental agreement she'd found taped inside the unit. A single sheet of paper listing only a P.O. box as contact information. Lena's expression shifted subtly, curiosity mingling with unease. "What is this about, Evelyn?" "It's about Maggie Collins," Evelyn said quietly, watching Lena's face for any flicker of recognition. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Lena sighed and motioned for Evelyn to follow her into the back room, where shelves lined with binders and microfiche machines stood like sentinels, guarding secrets long forgotten. "This isn't going to be easy," Lena warned as she pulled out a dusty ledger detailing property rentals across town. "Safekeep has changed ownership twice since '94. Records are spotty at best." They pored over documents for hours, piecing together fragments of information. Eventually they found it. Unit 14B had been rented anonymously, paid in cash every 6 months like clockwork since 1995. No name, no forwarding address. Just payments made in unmarked envelopes slipped under the manager's door. "Whoever did this didn't want to leave a trail," Lena murmured, tapping her pen against the ledger. "And whoever sent you that key, they wanted you specifically to find it." Evelyn nodded grimly. The realization weighed heavily on her shoulders. This wasn't random, it was personal. But why her, and why now? Later that afternoon, Evelyn decided to visit Sheriff O'Reilly. He'd been a deputy back when Maggie disappeared, young and eager, but ultimately powerless to solve the case. Now approaching retirement, he seemed resigned to the unsolved mysteries that lingered in their small town. His office smelled faintly of stale coffee and pine cleaner. When Evelyn explained her discovery, his weathered face darkened. "You shouldn't have gone snooping around that storage unit," he said gruffly, leaning back in his chair. "Some things are better left alone, Evelyn." "Better for who?" she shot back, gripping the edge of his desk. "Maggie deserves justice. Her family deserves closure." O'Reilly sighed, rubbing his temples. "Listen, I get it. You cared about that girl, we all did. But reopening old wounds won't change anything. Whoever took her, if she's even still alive, is long gone by now." "That's not good enough," Evelyn snapped, surprising herself with the force of her words. She softened slightly, lowering her voice. "Someone knows something. Someone sent me that key for a reason. All I'm asking is for you to look into it." The sheriff hesitated, then shook his head firmly. "I'll check with Safekeep, see if there's anything new to go on. But don't expect much. And Evelyn," he leaned forward, his tone serious, "be careful. Not everyone wants these kinds of ghosts stirred up." As she left the station, Evelyn felt a chill settle over her. O'Reilly's warning echoed in her mind, but it only strengthened her resolve. Whatever truths lay buried in this town, she intended to unearth them, even if it meant confronting the past she tried so hard to forget. That evening, Evelyn sat alone in her living room, the bracelet and rusted box resting on the coffee table like relics of another time. She couldn't shake the image of Maggie's bright smile or the weight of Sheriff O'Reilly's warning. The town wanted to forget, but Evelyn knew she couldn't, not until she understood what had happened that night. Her gaze drifted to the staircase leading up to the attic, where decades' worth of memories lay boxed away. It had been years since she'd ventured into the dusty space, but something nagged at her now, a faint recollection of helping Maggie organize some belongings one summer afternoon long ago. Could there be anything left from those days? With effort, Evelyn climbed the narrow stairs, flipping the switch to illuminate the cramped room filled with forgotten treasures. Cardboard boxes were stacked haphazardly against the walls, their labels faded with age. She opened one after another, sifting through photo albums, holiday decorations, and old clothes. Then, tucked beneath a pile of yellowed newspapers, she found it, a small wooden chest decorated with painted daisies. She recognized it immediately. It had belonged to Maggie. How it ended up in Evelyn's attic, she couldn't say, but her heart raced as she lifted the lid. Inside were letters, notebooks, and scraps of paper tied together with fraying ribbon. Evelyn carried the chest downstairs, settling onto the couch with the first bundle of papers. As she unfolded them, she felt an ache of nostalgia mixed with dread. These were fragments of Maggie's inner world, letters to friends, scribbled notes about school dances, and poems brimming with teenage longing. One letter stood out among the rest, written in Maggie's loopy handwriting. It was addressed simply to whoever finds this. Evelyn's hands trembled as she began to read. If you're reading this, it means something bad has happened to me. I don't know who to trust anymore. There's someone they watch too closely. They know things they shouldn't. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but now I'm sure. I can feel their eyes on me everywhere I go. If anything happens, look closer at the people closest to me, the ones no one would ever suspect. The letter ended abruptly, unsigned. Evelyn stared at the words, her mind racing. Who could Maggie have been referring to? A teacher? A neighbor? Someone in her own family? Her thoughts turned to the adults in Maggie's life back then. The coaches, the church leaders, the parents who volunteered at school events. All of them had seemed trustworthy, pillars of the community. But Maggie's words suggested otherwise. Buried deeper in the chest was a spiral notebook filled with more poems. One caught Evelyn's attention, its title stark against the page, The Shadow Man. He walks where light dares not tread, a whisper soft yet heavy dread. His face is hidden, his voice unclear, but I feel him near, always near. Evelyn shivered despite the warmth of the house. Whoever this shadow man was, he, or she, had left an indelible mark on Maggie's psyche, and if Evelyn was right, they might hold the key to understanding her disappearance. As she closed the notebook, a name surfaced unbidden in her mind. Daniel Hargrove, Maggie's uncle, who lived just outside town. He'd been a quiet man, often seen tinkering in his garage or walking along the edge of the woods. Back then, no one thought twice about his presence at family gatherings or how often he offered to drive Maggie places. But now, Evelyn wondered. She glanced at the clock. It was late, but sleep felt impossible. Instead, she resolved to visit Daniel tomorrow. Whether he knew anything or not, Evelyn was certain of one thing. Maggie's voice was reaching out across the years, begging to be heard, and Evelyn wouldn't let her down. Maggie Collins sat at the back of Mrs. Peterson's English class, her pencil scratching furiously across the lined paper in front of her. The other students were busy dissecting Robert Frost poems or doodling in the margins of their notebooks. But Maggie was lost in her own world, a swirl of words and emotions that spilled onto the page without restraint. Evelyn Harper stood near the chalkboard, observing quietly. As a volunteer aide for the school's after-school program, she'd taken an interest in Maggie early on. There was something about the girl, her quiet intensity, the way she seemed both eager to connect and deeply guarded, that drew Evelyn in. She often found herself lingering by Maggie's desk during free writing sessions, offering gentle encouragement when needed. Today was no different. When the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Evelyn approached Maggie as she gathered her things. "That looked like quite the poem you were working on," Evelyn said with a warm smile. "Care to share?" Maggie hesitated, glancing around to ensure no one else was listening. Then reluctantly, she handed over the sheet of paper. Written in bold, uneven strokes were the lines, "I hear footsteps behind me, but when I turn, they're gone. Is it my shadow, or is it someone who doesn't belong?" Evelyn read the words carefully, her brow furrowing slightly. "This is powerful stuff, Maggie. Are you okay?" Maggie shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "It's just something I made up, for fun." But Evelyn wasn't convinced. Over the next few weeks, she noticed subtle changes in Maggie. The once vivacious teenager grew quieter, more withdrawn. Her usual seat near her friends in the cafeteria became a solitary spot by the window. And though she still attended the after-school program, her interactions with others were brief and strained. One rainy afternoon, Evelyn stayed late to help Maggie tidy up the art supplies. They worked in silence until Maggie finally spoke. her voice barely above a whisper. Do you ever feel like someone's watching you? Like they know everything you do before you even do it? Evelyn paused, setting down the paintbrushes she'd been organizing. What makes you say that? Maggie hugged her arms tightly around herself, staring out the rain-streaked window. There's this person. They're always there. At home, at school, even when I'm walking to the store. I can't explain it, but it feels wrong. Like they're waiting for something. Who is it? Evelyn asked gently. Can you tell me who's making you feel this way? Maggie shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I can't. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Everyone thinks they're so nice, so trustworthy. But I see it. They're not what they seem. Evelyn reached out, placing a comforting hand on Maggie's shoulder. You don't have to face this alone, Maggie. If someone's hurting you or scaring you, you need to tell someone. Please. For a moment, Maggie looked as though she might confide further, but then she pulled away, forcing a smile. It's nothing, really. Just my imagination running wild. Thanks for listening, Evelyn. And with that, she slipped out into the rain, leaving Evelyn standing in the empty classroom, worry gnawing at her heart. Summer, 1994. As the months passed, Evelyn saw less and less of Maggie. Rumors circulated among parents and teachers that she'd become moody and rebellious, skipping family dinners and staying out late. But Evelyn knew better. She remembered the fear in Maggie's eyes, the way her hands trembled as she wrote those haunting poems. Something or someone was tearing Maggie apart from the inside. Their final conversation came just days before the county fair. Evelyn spotted Maggie sitting alone on a bench outside the library, her knees drawn up to her chest. Hey, stranger, Evelyn said softly, taking a seat beside her. Maggie offered a weak smile. Hey, how have you been holding up? Another shrug. Okay, I guess. Just tired of pretending everything's fine. Evelyn searched Maggie's face, seeing the cracks beneath her brave facade. You don't have to pretend with me, you know. Whatever's going on, I'm here to listen. Maggie hesitated, then whispered, what if the people closest to you aren't who they say they are? What if they're lying to everyone? Before Evelyn could respond, Maggie stood abruptly, brushing off her jeans. Never mind. Forget I said anything. See you around, Evelyn. She walked away quickly, leaving Evelyn rooted to the spot. That night, Evelyn lay awake, replaying their conversation in her mind. She should have pressed harder, asked more questions. But she hadn't. And now, nearly 3 decades later, the guilt of that silence burned brighter than ever. Back in the present, Evelyn closed the notebook containing Maggie's poems. Her vision blurred with tears. The past wasn't done with her yet, not while Maggie's voice still echoed through the years, pleading for justice. Evelyn woke the next morning with Tommy Rigby's name lodged in her mind like a splinter. He'd been a year older than Maggie, a troubled kid with a reputation for reckless behavior, skipping school, vandalizing property, and riding his dirt bike at dangerous speeds through the woods. On the night Maggie disappeared, he'd been seen near the fairgrounds, covered in mud and acting strangely when questioned by police. At the time, suspicion had swirled around him, but without evidence, the investigation moved on. Tommy eventually left town after high school, returning only sporadically over the years. These days, he lived in a ramshackle trailer deep in the woods, isolated from the community he once called home. Evelyn knew confronting him wouldn't be easy, but she couldn't ignore the possibility that he might know something or someone who could shed light on Maggie's disappearance. By late afternoon, Evelyn parked her car along a narrow dirt road just outside town. The path leading to Tommy's trailer was overgrown with brambles and wildflowers, forcing her to pick her way carefully. When she finally reached the clearing, she found the trailer tilted precariously on cinder blocks, its rusted exterior blending seamlessly with the surrounding chaos of nature reclaiming itself. Tommy sat on the porch steps, shirtless and barefoot, tinkering with an old motorcycle engine. His dark hair was longer now, streaked with gray, and his face bore weathered lines of someone who'd spent too many years under the sun. When he saw Evelyn approaching, his hands stilled and his expression hardened. "What do you want?" he asked gruffly, not bothering to stand. "I need to talk to you," Evelyn said firmly, stopping a few feet away. "About what?" "Maggie Collins." At the mention of Maggie's name, Tommy flinched visibly. For a moment, he looked like the scared teenager Evelyn remembered from all those years ago. The boy who'd stumbled into the sheriff's office smelling of sweat and fear, insisting he hadn't seen anything unusual that night. "She's gone," Tommy muttered, turning back to his work. "Nothing you or I say is going to change that." "Not true," Evelyn countered, stepping closer. "Someone sent me this." She pulled out the silver bracelet and held it up, letting the sunlight catch its tarnished surface. Tommy froze again, his jaw tightening. "Where'd you get that?" "That doesn't matter right now. What matters is why someone wanted me to find it, and why you won't look me in the eye." He slammed his wrench down on the step beside him, standing abruptly. "You think I had something to do with it? Is that why you're here? To accuse me?" "No," Evelyn said evenly, meeting his gaze. "But I'm not leaving until you tell me what you know." For a long moment they stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Tommy sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I didn't hurt her, okay? I swear on my life I didn't touch her." "Then help me understand," Evelyn urged. "Why were you near the fairgrounds that night? What did you see?" Tommy hesitated, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of decades pressed down on him. "I was running from something, or someone. I don't even remember anymore. All I know is that I heard shouting, near the edge of the parking lot. By the time I got there, whoever it was had already gone, and so had Maggie." "Did you see anyone?" Evelyn pressed. "A car? A figure? Anything?" Tommy shook his head, frustration etched into every line of his face. "It was dark. I wasn't exactly sober either. Look, I told the cops everything I knew back then. They didn't believe me, and neither will you." "But someone believes you," Evelyn said softly. "Or else why would they send me that key?" Tommy's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Fear, guilt, regret. Whatever it was, it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "I don't know anything about any key," he snapped, "and I don't care. Leave me out of this, Evelyn. Some things are better left buried." With that, he turned his back on her, picking up his wrench and resuming his work as if she weren't even there. Evelyn lingered for a moment longer, searching for any sign of weakness or truth in his demeanor. But Tommy had shut down completely, his defenses impenetrable. Reluctantly, she turned and made her way back to her car, clutching the bracelet tightly in her fist. As she drove away, one thought echoed in her mind. If Tommy wasn't the person Maggie feared, if he truly hadn't been involved, then who else could it be? And how far would they go to keep their secrets hidden? The announcement came quietly, tucked into the back pages of the local paper. Dr. Judith Lang to speak at Community Center on Trauma in Rural Communities. Evelyn nearly missed it as she flipped them through the headlines over her morning coffee. But when her eyes landed on the name, her heart skipped a beat. Judith Lang, the therapist who had worked with Maggie during the months leading up to her disappearance. Evelyn hadn't thought about Dr. Lang in years, but now memories rushed back. Sessions behind closed doors, hushed conversations between parents and counselors, the way Maggie would emerge looking drained yet resolute. At the time, no one questioned Dr. Lang's role. She was seen as a lifeline for troubled teens like Maggie. Yet something about her presence nagged at Evelyn now, a faint unease she couldn't quite place. She decided to attend the seminar that evening. The community center buzzed with curious townsfolk, eager to hear what the city expert had to say about their quiet corner of the world. Evelyn slipped into the back row, watching as Dr. Lang took the stage. If Evelyn hadn't known better, she might not have recognized her. Gone was the young, earnest woman from the police reports. This Judith Lang was older, her auburn hair streaked with silver, her sharp features softened by time. She wore a tailored navy suit that lent her an air of authority, and her voice carried the practiced calm of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "Trauma doesn't always announce itself loudly," Dr. Lang began, her gaze sweeping across the room. "It hides in plain sight, in the silences between words, in the shadows of our daily lives. And in small towns like this one, where everyone knows each other, trauma can become invisible, because we assume we understand the story. Evelyn listened intently, her mind racing. Was this just a coincidence? Or was there more to Dr. Lang's return than met the eye? After the talk, Evelyn lingered near the exit, pretending to browse the refreshment table, while keeping an eye on Dr. Lang as she chatted with attendees. When the crowd thinned, Evelyn approached cautiously. "Dr. Lang," she said, forcing warmth into her tone, "I'm Evelyn Harper. I don't know if you remember me. I used to volunteer at the school." Dr. Lang turned, her smile professional but guarded. "Of course, Evelyn. How could I forget? You were such a steady presence for so many students." Her eyes narrowed slightly, studying Evelyn's face. "Is there something I can help you with?" Evelyn hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Actually, I wanted to ask about Maggie Collins. I saw your name in some old files recently, and, well, with everything happening lately, I thought maybe you'd have some insight." For a split second, Dr. Lang's composure faltered. A flicker of surprise, perhaps even alarm, crossing her features before she masked it with a polite nod. "Maggie," she murmured, her voice tinged with sadness. "Such a tragic case. I wish I could tell you I had answers. But therapy is confidential, even after all these years." "I understand," Evelyn replied quickly, sensing resistance. "But surely you must have suspected something, or someone. Maggie confided in you, didn't she?" Dr. Lang's expression hardened ever so slightly. "My sessions with Maggie were private, Evelyn. Whatever she shared stayed between us. That's the foundation of trust in therapy." "It's also the foundation of silence," Evelyn countered gently, leaning closer. "And sometimes silence lets dangerous things fester." Dr. Lang stared at her for a long moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then, with a sigh, she glanced around the nearly empty room before lowering her voice. "Look, Evelyn, I'm here to give a presentation on trauma, not reopen old wounds. If you're determined to dig into Maggie's case, be careful. Not everyone wants those wounds exposed." Her words sent a chill down Evelyn's spine. Before she could respond, Dr. Lang straightened, offering a tight smile. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for tomorrow's session. It was good seeing you again." As Dr. Lang walked away, Evelyn felt a knot tighten in her stomach. There was something off about her, the careful phrasing, the evasiveness, the warning cloaked as concern. Whether Dr. Lang was protecting herself or someone else, Evelyn couldn't say. But one thing was clear. Maggie's therapist knew more than she was letting on. That night, Evelyn sat alone in her kitchen, staring at the bracelet and the rusted box. Each new piece of the puzzle only deepened the mystery. First Tommy, now Dr. Lang. It seemed everyone connected to Maggie had secrets they were desperate to keep buried. And yet Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was closer than ever, hiding in plain sight, waiting for her to uncover it. Evelyn's insomnia had grown worse with each passing day. The pieces of Maggie's puzzle scattered across her kitchen table taunted her. Letters, poems, the bracelet, notes scrawled in the margins of old newspaper clippings. She'd spent hours poring over them, searching for connections, patterns, anything that might lead her closer to the truth. It was during one of these late-night research sessions that she stumbled upon something unexpected. A faded article buried deep in the archives of the local paper. Dated 6 weeks after Maggie's disappearance, it read, "Barn fire destroys rural property. Owner dies." Shortly after, a fire consumed a barn on Paul Delaney's property near the county fairgrounds early Sunday morning. Though firefighters managed to contain the blaze before it spread to nearby structures, extensive damage was reported. Mr. Delaney, 78, passed away days later from unrelated causes. Neighbors described him as a reclusive man who rarely interacted with others. Authorities ruled the fire accidental, citing faulty wiring as the likely cause. Evelyn stared at the clipping, her pulse quickening. Why did this feel significant? At first glance, it seemed like just another tragic footnote in the life of an elderly recluse. But the proximity to the fairgrounds and the timing stirred something in her gut. Paul Delaney. The name sounded vaguely familiar, though she couldn't place it immediately. Pushing herself up from the table, Evelyn rummaged through her attic again, pulling out boxes of old photographs and community event programs. Finally, she found what she was looking for, a black and white photo taken at a charity bake sale years ago. There he was, standing off to the side, Paul Delaney, unassuming but present. He hadn't been a prominent figure in town, but he'd been there, quietly part of the fabric of their small community. What had happened to his property after his death? And why hadn't anyone connected the fire to Maggie's case? The next morning, Evelyn drove out to the site of Delaney's farm. It wasn't far from where Maggie had last been seen, tucked away behind dense rows of trees that shielded it from view. Today, all that remained was a charred foundation surrounded by overgrown weeds and rusting machinery. Nature had begun reclaiming the land, but the remnants of the barn still stood as a grim monument to its fiery end. Evelyn parked along the dirt road and stepped cautiously onto the property. Her boots crunched against gravel and broken glass as she made her way toward the ruins. Something about the place felt heavy, suffused with an eerie quiet that pressed against her ears. She crouched down near the edge of the foundation, brushing away dirt and debris with gloved hands. That's when she saw it, a shard of melted metal half buried beneath ash and rubble. As she pulled it free, she realized it wasn't just any scrap of metal. It was part of a padlock, twisted and warped from the heat. Someone had gone to great lengths to destroy whatever this barn once held. Her mind raced. Had Maggie been here? Was this where she disappeared? Or worse? And if so, why had no one thought to investigate further at the time? Back home, Evelyn dug deeper into Paul Delaney's history. Records were sparse, but she discovered that he'd inherited the property from his father decades earlier. Neighbors recalled him as a loner, keeping mostly to himself, except for occasional visits to town for supplies. One detail caught her attention, though. Delaney had served as a volunteer handyman at several local schools, including Maggie's high school. A chill ran down Evelyn's spine. Could Maggie have known him? Trusted him even? If she had confided in him, or sought refuge on his property, it would explain why her disappearance had gone unnoticed for so long. But then there was the fire. Had someone set it deliberately to erase evidence? And if so, who? Later that evening, Evelyn called Lena Monroe, hoping for insight. "Do you remember Paul Delaney?" "Okay," she asked without preamble. Lena paused thoughtfully on the other end of the line. "Vaguely. Quiet guy, always tinkering around. Why?" "I think his barn might be connected to Maggie's case," Evelyn explained, recounting what she'd found. "The fire, his sudden death. It feels like too much of a coincidence." There was silence on the other end before Lena spoke again, her voice low. "I don't know what to tell you, Evelyn. People didn't ask a lot of questions back then. If something seemed off, they swept it under the rug, rather than stir up trouble." "And now," Evelyn pressed, "and now," Lena sighed heavily, "you're treading dangerous ground. Whoever lit that fire, if it was intentional, they're probably still around. Be careful, Evelyn. Some secrets are best left alone." Evelyn thanked her and hung up, staring at the shard of metal on her table. Secrets or not, she couldn't turn away now. Every clue pointed to the same conclusion. Maggie's fate was tied to this place, and to whoever had tried to burn it away. As she sat there, the weight of the past pressing down on her, Evelyn whispered aloud, "I'll find you, Maggie. I promise." Early spring, 1994. Maggie Collins sat cross-legged on the floor of her bedroom, scribbling furiously in a spiral notebook. The soft glow of her desk lamp illuminated the page as she wrote, "Dear Mr. Delaney, thank you for your last letter. I love hearing about your stories from the war. It makes me feel like someone understands what it's like to be scared all the time. People here think I'm just being dramatic, but it's real. There's someone who watches me, follows me. They act nice, but I know better. I wish I could tell you more, but even writing this feels dangerous." She paused, glancing nervously toward the closed door before continuing. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone would notice if I disappeared. But then I remember you said you'd always look out for me. You're the only person I trust right now. Please don't stop writing back." Carefully folding the letter into an envelope, Maggie addressed it to Paul Delaney and slipped it into her backpack. She didn't dare leave it lying around. Someone might find it. someone might already know. Present day, Evelyn returned to Paul Delaney's abandoned farm at dawn, armed with gloves, a flashlight, and a growing sense of urgency. The shard of melted padlock still weighed heavily in her pocket, a grim reminder of the secrets buried beneath the ashes. If Maggie had confided in Paul, and if he'd kept her writings, they could hold the key to unraveling the mystery. The morning mist clung to the overgrown fields as Evelyn picked her way through the ruins of the barn. She searched methodically, sifting through debris and charred remnants of wood and metal. Hours passed without success, and frustration began to creep in. What if the fire had destroyed everything? What if she was chasing ghosts? Then near the far corner of the foundation, she spotted something unusual, a patch of earth that seemed disturbed, darker than the surrounding soil. Kneeling, Evelyn brushed away loose dirt and ash until her fingers struck something solid. It was a metal box, rusted and warped, but intact enough to protect its contents. Her breath caught as she pried open the lid. Inside were several small notebooks bound together with twine, their covers brittle with age. A note lay on top, written in shaky handwriting. To whoever finds these, protect them. They belong to Maggie. Tears pricked Evelyn's eyes as she carefully untied the bundle. Each notebook contained pages of Maggie's thoughts, fears, and fragmented confessions. Some entries were dated, others were undated jumbles of emotion. As Evelyn flipped through them, one passage stood out. He knows about the letters. He saw me drop one off today. I thought I was careful, but nothing gets past him. He smiled when he asked me about it, like he already knew what was inside. I burned the next one instead of sending it. But how long can I keep hiding? Another entry read, Mr. Delaney says I should come stay with him if things get worse. He lives far enough away that no one would look for me there. But I'm scared. What if he finds out? What if I lead him straight to Mr. Delaney too? Evelyn's hands trembled as she turned the pages. Maggie's fear leapt off the paper, raw and visceral. Whoever he wasn't just watching, he was closing in. But the most chilling entry came near the end of the final notebook. I don't think Mr. Delaney is safe anymore. Someone has been asking questions about him, questions about me. He says not to worry, but I see it in his eyes. He's afraid too. I don't know what to do. If anything happens to me, blame the Shadow Man. Evelyn sat back on her heels, overwhelmed by the weight of what she'd uncovered. Maggie hadn't simply vanished. She'd been running from someone, trusting Paul Delaney as her lifeline. And now Evelyn realized the fire hadn't been an accident. Someone had wanted to erase every trace of Maggie's connection to this place. As she tucked the journals carefully into her bag, Evelyn felt a surge of determination. These writings weren't just evidence. They were Maggie's voice, reaching across decades to demand justice. Whoever the Shadow Man was, Evelyn vowed to unmask him. But first she needed answers. Answers that only one person might have, Dr. Judith Lang. Evelyn wrestled with her conscience as she stood outside Dr. Judith Lang's hotel room late that night. Breaking into someone's private space went against every moral fiber in her body, but desperation had taken hold of her. Maggie's journals hinted at betrayal on a level Evelyn couldn't ignore, a trusted adult exploiting their power over a vulnerable teenager. And if Judith Lang knew something and had stayed silent, then Evelyn needed to know why. The hallway was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of the vending machine down the corridor. She glanced around once more before slipping a credit card between the doorframe and lock. It clicked open after a few tense seconds, and she slipped inside, closing the door softly behind her. Judith's room was neat but impersonal, the kind of temporary refuge designed to leave no trace. Evelyn moved quickly, scanning the desk and dresser for anything useful. Her heart pounded as she opened drawers and rifled through papers, each moment stretching longer than the last. Then she found it, a locked briefcase tucked beneath the bed. The key wasn't hard to locate. It was hidden in plain sight, taped to the underside of the bedside table. Inside the case were files, meticulously organized and labeled. One folder caught her eye immediately. Collins. Margaret, Maggie. Her hands shook as she flipped it open. The contents confirmed her worst fears. Notes from therapy sessions detailed Maggie's growing anxiety about an unnamed authority figure who made her feel special while simultaneously manipulating her trust. Judith had documented red flags, a pattern of grooming behavior, gifts given under the guise of kindness, subtle threats disguised as concern. Yet there was no record of Judith reporting any of this to authorities. Instead, cryptic marginalia suggested she'd chosen silence. Client expresses fear of retaliation, further action risks exposure. And worse, subject holds significant influence within community. Proceeding could jeopardize safety of others. Evelyn's stomach churned. Whoever this person was, they weren't just preying on Maggie. They were untouchable. Someone revered, respected. Someone whose reputation Judith had protected at the expense of a child's life. A noise outside the door startled her. A soft knock followed by the jingle of keys. Panicked, Evelyn shoved the file back into the briefcase and slid it under the bed, just as the door creaked open. Dr. Lang froze in the doorway, her eyes narrowing as they landed on Evelyn, standing guiltily in the middle of the room. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Judith stepped inside, closing the door firmly behind her. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice low but sharp. "I came for answers," Evelyn shot back, clutching the edge of the desk for support. "You knew, Judith. You knew what was happening to Maggie, and you did nothing." Judith's expression shifted, a flicker of guilt crossing her face before she masked it with practiced calm. "It's not that simple, Evelyn. Do you think I wanted to stay silent? But some battles aren't won by charging headfirst into them. Sometimes discretion is the only way to protect those who can't protect themselves." "Protect them!" Evelyn spat, incredulous. "You let her disappear. You let whoever was hurting her keep operating unchecked." Judith sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I tried to intervene indirectly. I encouraged Maggie to document everything, to write letters, keep notes. I thought if we gathered enough evidence." Her voice trailed off, heavy with regret. "But then she stopped coming to sessions, said she didn't feel safe anymore. After that, there was nothing I could do." "There was plenty you could have done," Evelyn snapped, tears welling in her eyes. "You could have gone to the police, exposed him. But instead, you buried the truth because it was easier." Judith's gaze hardened. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. This town doesn't tolerate scandal, Evelyn. If I'd spoken up, it would have destroyed lives, including my own. So you chose to sacrifice Maggie instead?" Evelyn whispered, her voice breaking. Silence hung thick between them, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder outside. Finally, Judith spoke, her tone weary. "Whoever it was, they're still out there, still powerful. And if you're not careful, Evelyn, they'll come for you too." Evelyn stared at her, anger warring with fear. She didn't need Judith's warnings to know the stakes. She'd already seen how far this person would go to keep their secrets buried. But she also knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't stop until justice was served. With nothing left to say, Evelyn turned and walked out of the room, leaving Judith standing alone amidst the wreckage of her choices. Back home, Evelyn spread the stolen files across her kitchen table, poring over every detail. Names, dates, locations, all pointed toward a single horrifying conclusion. The predator Maggie feared wasn't just anyone. He was someone Evelyn herself had trusted implicitly. And now, it was time to confront him. Evelyn's hands trembled as she stared at the files spread across her kitchen table. Each page felt heavier than the last, the weight of Maggie's suffering pressing down on her shoulders. But one name kept surfacing in Judith's notes, mentioned only obliquely, but enough to send a chill through Evelyn's bones. Carl Hensley. Carl had been the security guard stationed at the county fairgrounds back in 1994. A quiet man in his mid-50s who'd worked part-time odd jobs around town. He'd disappeared from public life shortly after Maggie vanished, leaving behind rumors that he'd moved away or simply couldn't handle the stress of working nights anymore. No one had thought much of it at the time. People came and went all the time in their small community. But now, Evelyn wondered if Carl knew more than he let on, and if fear had kept him silent for nearly 3 decades. Tracking down Carl wasn't easy. The address listed under his old employment records led to a boarded-up house on the outskirts of town, its windows dark and its yard overtaken by weeds. A neighbor pointed her toward a trailer park several miles away, where they said an older man fitting Carl's description lived alone. When Evelyn arrived, she found him sitting outside his weathered trailer, nursing a cup of coffee. His hair was almost entirely gray now, his face lined with years of hard living. Still, there was no mistaking those sharp blue eyes that widened slightly when he saw her approaching. "Carl Hensley?" Evelyn asked cautiously. "That's me," he replied gruffly, setting the mug aside. "What do you want?" "My name is Evelyn Harper. I'm looking into what happened to Maggie Collins." At the mention of Maggie's name, Carl stiffened visibly. For a moment, he looked like he might bolt inside and slam the door. Instead, he sighed deeply, rubbing a hand over his face. "That poor girl," he muttered. "Thought I'd put that night behind me." "I think you know something," Evelyn pressed gently, taking a seat on the step beside him. "Something you haven't told anyone." Carl hesitated, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he began to speak. "It was late, after closing time. Most folks had cleared out already, but I stayed behind to make sure everything was locked up tight. That's when I saw it." He paused, swallowing hard. "A car parked near the edge of the lot. Black sedan, shiny like it didn't belong there. Didn't think much of it at first, figured maybe someone forgot something. But then I saw her." "Maggie?" Evelyn whispered. He nodded grimly. "She was talking to someone inside the car. Couldn't see their face. It was too dark. But I could tell she was upset. Scared even. She kept looking over her shoulder like she wanted to run." Evelyn's heart raced. "Did you hear anything? Did she say who it was?" "No, but whoever it was, they weren't letting her leave. They leaned closer, said something that made her freeze. And then," Carl trailed off, shaking his head. "Then they got out of the car and grabbed her arm, pulled her inside." "You didn't call the police?" Evelyn asked, incredulous. "I tried," Carl snapped, his voice rising. "I ran toward them, shouting, trying to stop whatever was happening. But before I could get close, another vehicle pulled up. One of those big SUVs with tinted windows. Two guys got out, both dressed like they meant business. Told me to mind my own damn business unless I wanted trouble." "What did you do?" "What could I do?" Carl shot back bitterly. "They threatened me, Evelyn. Said if I so much as breathed a word about what I saw, they'd ruin me. And they weren't bluffing. I lost my job within days. Folks started giving me dirty looks, like I'd done something wrong. So yeah, I kept my mouth shut. Kept telling myself it wasn't my fight, that someone else would figure it out." "But no one did," Evelyn murmured, her anger tempered by pity. "And Maggie paid the price." Carl hung his head, guilt etched into every line of his face. "I should have done more. Should have fought harder. But I was scared, okay? Scared of losing everything." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of Carl's confession settled between them, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Evelyn broke the silence. "Who were they, Carl? The men in the SUV? The ones who threatened you? Do you remember anything about them?" He shook his head slowly. "Not really. Just that they worked for someone important, someone who could make problems disappear, or create bigger ones if they felt like it." Evelyn's stomach churned. This wasn't just about Maggie anymore. It was about power, corruption, and the lengths people would go to protect their secrets. Whoever was behind this had woven a web of fear and complicity that stretched far beyond one girl's disappearance. "You need to tell the sheriff," Evelyn said firmly, standing up. "It's not too late to do the right thing." "And end up like Paul Delaney?" Carl retorted sharply. "No thanks. Some things are better left buried." "Even if it means letting Maggie's killer walk free?" Evelyn countered, her voice trembling with emotion. "She trusted you to keep her safe that night, Carl. You owe it to her to try again." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Carl sitting alone on the steps, staring blankly into the distance. Back home, Evelyn sat in the dim light of her kitchen, piecing together the fragments of truth she'd uncovered. Maggie's journals, Judith's files, Carl's eyewitness account. All pointed to a single horrifying conclusion. The predator, the manipulator, the shadow man. It was someone who wielded authority and influence, someone whose reach extended far beyond the confines of their small town. And Evelyn knew exactly where to find him. Evelyn sat in her car outside the sheriff's office, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The revelations from Carl Hensley weighed heavily on her mind. But it wasn't just his confession that had brought her here. It was the growing certainty that Sheriff Frank O'Reilly knew far more than he'd ever admitted. O'Reilly had been a deputy back in 1994, young and eager to prove himself. Over the years, he'd risen through the ranks to become one of the most respected figures in town. But Evelyn now saw cracks in the facade, signs of a man burdened by secrets too heavy to bear. She stepped out of the car and marched into the station, ignoring the curious glances of the deputies on duty. O'Reilly's door was slightly ajar, and she pushed it open without knocking. "Sheriff," she said sharply, stepping inside, "we need to talk." O'Reilly looked up from his desk, startled. For a moment, he seemed older than his years, the lines on his face deeper, his eyes clouded with resignation. "Evelyn," he said wearily, "what is it this time?" "You know damn well what it is," she shot back, slamming Maggie's bracelet onto his desk. "This isn't just about some missing girl anymore. It's about corruption, lies, betrayal, and you've been sitting on the truth for nearly 30 years. O'Reilly sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Sit down, Evelyn. You're not going to like what I have to say." "I already don't like it," she snapped, but she took a seat anyway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. For a long moment, O'Reilly stared at the bracelet, as if seeing it for the first time. Then he began to speak, his voice low and halting. "The night Maggie disappeared, we found evidence. Not much, just a partial tire track near the fairgrounds, and a witness who claimed to see a black sedan speeding away. At first we thought it might lead us somewhere. But then," he trailed off, shaking his head. "Then what?" Evelyn demanded. "Then someone came to me," O'Reilly continued, his gaze dropping to the floor. "Someone powerful, someone who could make or break careers with a single phone call. They told me to drop it, to focus our resources elsewhere. Said there were bigger things at stake than one runaway teenager." Evelyn's blood ran cold. "Who was it? Who gave the order?" O'Reilly hesitated, clearly torn between guilt and fear. Finally, he whispered, "It was Judge Harold Grayson." The name hit Evelyn like a punch to the gut. Judge Grayson had been a pillar of the community, a stern yet fair figure who presided over countless trials and civic events. His family name carried weight in their small town, synonymous with integrity and justice. To think he could be involved in something so monstrous. "And you just let him get away with it?" Evelyn asked, her voice trembling with anger. "What choice did I have?" O'Reilly shot back, his own frustration boiling over. "He threatened to destroy me, and anyone else who dared question him. Said he'd smear my reputation, ruin my marriage, ruin my life. And he meant it, Evelyn. You don't say no to a man like Harold Grayson." "But Maggie was collateral damage," O'Reilly interrupted, his voice breaking. "I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that she'd turn up eventually, safe and sound. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew she was gone because of me, because I didn't fight hard enough." The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Evelyn stared at O'Reilly, seeing not the confident lawman she'd known for decades, but a broken man haunted by regret. "So what happens now?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you going to keep letting him win? Keep protecting his lies?" O'Reilly met her gaze, tears glistening in his eyes. "No," he said quietly. "Not anymore." Later that evening, Evelyn returned home, her mind racing with possibilities. O'Reilly's confession had confirmed her worst fears. Judge Grayson was the shadow man Maggie had feared, the man who had manipulated her trust and silenced anyone who dared oppose him. But exposing the truth wouldn't be easy. Grayson's influence stretched far beyond their town, entangled in webs of power and privilege that would fight tooth and nail to protect him. Evelyn knew she couldn't do it alone. As she sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by Maggie's letters, Paul Delaney's journals, and Judith Lang's files, she made a decision. She would gather every shred of evidence she could find, no matter how small. She would confront Judge Grayson, not as Evelyn Harper, grieving friend, but as a force of reckoning. Because Maggie deserved justice, and Evelyn wasn't afraid to burn the whole town down to get it. The morning sun filtered weakly through the trees as Evelyn and Lena approached the ruins of Paul Delaney's barn. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and charred wood, a grim reminder of the fire that had consumed the property decades ago. Both women carried shovels, their faces set with quiet determination. "I still can't believe you talked me into this," Lena muttered, brushing a strand of gray hair from her face. "If anyone finds out—" "No one will," Evelyn interrupted firmly. "We're doing this for Maggie, for the truth." Lena sighed but nodded, gripping her shovel tighter. "All right, let's get to it." They began digging near the spot where Evelyn had uncovered the metal box containing Maggie's earlier writings. The ground was uneven and stubborn, roots tangling around their tools like skeletal fingers reaching up from the soil. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the rhythmic scrape of metal against dirt. Finally, Lena's shovel struck something solid, a hollow thud that echoed faintly beneath the surface. "Evelyn," she called, excitement mingling with apprehension. "I think we've got something." Together, they cleared away the remaining earth, revealing a wooden trapdoor embedded in the foundation. Its edges were scorched and warped from the fire, but it held firm when Evelyn tugged on the rusted handle. With Lena's help, they pried it open, exposing a narrow compartment below. Inside lay a single object, a leather-bound journal, its cover blackened but intact. Evelyn reached down gingerly, brushing away layers of ash and debris, before opening it to the first page. The handwriting was unmistakably Maggie's, neat yet urgent, as if every word had been written in haste. "This is it," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. "This is what he didn't want anyone to find." Back at Evelyn's house, they spread the journal across the kitchen table, poring over its contents under the soft glow of the overhead light. Each entry painted a harrowing picture of Maggie's final days. A young woman trapped between fear and hope, love and betrayal. "He says he loves me," Maggie wrote early on, "that I'm special, that no one else understands us the way we understand each other. But sometimes late at night, I wonder if he really means it, or if he just wants to keep me close." As they read further, the entries grew darker. "I thought I could trust him, thought he cared about me, but now I see it for what it is, control. He gives me gifts, tells me how much I mean to him, but then he gets angry when I try to pull away. Like I belong to him." And finally, chillingly, "Tonight is the fair. I told him I wasn't going to meet him anymore, that I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. He didn't take it well. Said people would talk if they found out about us, about what we've done. I don't know what he'll do next, but I'm scared. So scared." The last entry was dated the night of the fair. It ended abruptly, mid-sentence. "If anything happens to me, it's because of him. Don't let them forget." The page trailed off into silence, leaving Evelyn and Lena staring at the words in stunned horror. "He was grooming her," Lena murmured, her voice shaking, "using his power over her to manipulate her. And Grayson knew," Evelyn added bitterly, "knew and didn't care, as long as his reputation stayed intact." A heavy silence settled over the room as the weight of Maggie's final days pressed down on them. She hadn't just vanished. She'd been silenced, erased not only by her abuser, but by those who chose to protect him rather than seek justice. Evelyn closed the journal gently, her hands trembling. "We have everything we need now," she said quietly. "Every piece of evidence points to Grayson. His threats, his influence, his lies. They all lead back to him. But how do we prove it?" Lena asked. "Even with this, even with Carl's testimony and Judith's files, he's untouchable, Evelyn. People won't believe us." "They will," Evelyn replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "Because I won't stop until they do. This isn't just about Maggie anymore. It's about everyone he's hurt, everyone he's controlled. We owe it to her and to ourselves to make sure his secrets see the light of day." For the first time in years, Evelyn felt a flicker of hope amidst the grief. Maggie's voice had been buried for too long, stifled by fear and complicity, but now it was rising again, demanding to be heard. And Evelyn would make sure the world listened. Evelyn sat alone in her dimly lit living room, the pieces of Maggie's story laid out before her, like fragments of a shattered mirror. Each shard reflected a different angle of the truth, but together they formed an image too painful to bear. The journal, Judith's files, Carl's confession, it all pointed to one horrifying conclusion. Judge Harold Grayson wasn't just Maggie's abuser. He was also the married man at the center of Dr. Judith Lang's secret affair. The realization hit Evelyn like a punch to the gut. Judith hadn't stayed silent because she feared for her career or reputation. She'd protected Grayson to shield herself. Their clandestine relationship had been the thread tying everything together. The grooming, the threats, the cover-up. And Maggie, innocent and trusting, had stumbled into their web. But there was more. Evelyn flipped through Maggie's final journal entries again, searching for clues she might have missed. One line stood out, written in shaky handwriting near the end. I saw them together tonight, the judge and Dr. Lang. They didn't see me, but I know what I saw. It makes sense now, why he always called her when I tried to talk about him. Why she told me to be careful. They're in this together. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Maggie hadn't disappeared because Grayson wanted to silence her. She'd confronted them, exposed their lies, and something terrible had happened as a result. The next morning, Evelyn tracked down Judith Lang once more. This time, she didn't bother with pleasantries. Marching into Judith's hotel room uninvited, she slammed the journal onto the desk. You knew, Evelyn said, her voice low and dangerous. You knew exactly what Grayson was doing to Maggie, and you let it happen. Judith froze, her face pale as she stared at the journal. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it, but then she sank into a chair, defeated. Yes, she admitted quietly. I knew. How could you? Evelyn demanded, her anger bubbling over. How could you stand by while he manipulated her, while he destroyed her? It wasn't supposed to go that far, Judith whispered, tears streaming down her face. At first I thought, I don't even know what I thought, that I could help him change, that we could keep it quiet. But then Maggie found out. She came to me that night, furious, demanding answers. She said she was going to tell everyone, the school, the police, the whole town. What happened next? Evelyn pressed, her voice trembling. Judith hesitated, wringing her hands. Harold showed up. He must have followed her. She started screaming at him, accusing him of ruining her life. I tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't listen. Then she ran toward the edge of the fairgrounds. We chased after her, shouting for her to stop. Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. When she spoke again, it was barely audible. There was a car, a black sedan parked nearby. Harold grabbed her arm, trying to pull her inside, but she fought back. She slipped, fell backward. Judith choked on the words, unable to finish. Evelyn felt the floor drop out from beneath her. She died, she whispered. That's what you're saying. Judith nodded, sobbing uncontrollably. It was an accident, a horrible, tragic accident. But Harold panicked. He made me help him hide the body, said if anyone found out, our lives would be over. So we burned the barn, buried anything that connected us to her, and prayed no one would ever know. Evelyn staggered back, reeling from the weight of Judith's confession. Maggie hadn't run away. She hadn't vanished willingly. She'd been silenced forever. All because two people in positions of trust had chosen to protect themselves instead of her. And Paul Delaney? Evelyn asked hoarsely. What about him? Judith wiped her eyes, still shaking. He suspected something, kept asking questions, poking around where he shouldn't. Harold warned him to stay quiet, but Paul wouldn't back down. That's why the fire happened, to scare him off. But it didn't matter in the end. He died soon after anyway. Evelyn clenched her fists, fighting back tears of rage and sorrow. Every layer of this tragedy revealed another betrayal, another act of cowardice. Maggie had trusted these people, looked up to them, and they had failed her in the worst possible way. Later that evening, Evelyn met with Lena at the library, sharing everything Judith had confessed. Together, they compiled every piece of evidence they had gathered: Maggie's journals, Carl's testimony, Judith's files, and now her admission of guilt. It was enough to bring Grayson and Lang to justice, if anyone dared to believe them. "We'll go to the state police," Lena suggested, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "They can't ignore this, not with everything we have." Evelyn nodded, determination hardening her resolve. Grayson won't get away with this, not anymore. As they prepared to leave, Evelyn glanced at Maggie's bracelet, resting on the table like a silent witness to the horrors it represented. She picked it up, holding it tightly in her fist. "This ends now," she vowed softly, "for Maggie." And with that, she stepped out into the night, ready to face whatever came next. The town square buzzed with its usual quiet energy as Evelyn stood in the shadow of the courthouse steps, the weight of Maggie's story heavy in her hands. She had spent days preparing for this moment, gathering evidence, rehearsing every word she would say, steeling herself for the backlash that was sure to come. But now, staring at the familiar faces milling about, she felt a pang of doubt. Would they listen? Or would fear and loyalty to power silence them once again? Judith Lang sat on a bench near the fountain, her face pale and drawn. Evelyn had called her there under the pretense of discussing closure, but Judith knew better. Her eyes darted nervously around the square, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Then Judge Harold Grayson emerged from the courthouse, his tall frame commanding attention even as whispers rippled through the crowd. He wore his usual air of authority, though Evelyn noticed the faint tremor in his hands as he adjusted his tie. For decades, he had ruled this town, not just from the bench, but through intimidation and influence. Today, however, his reign would end. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife. "I asked you both here because it's time the truth came out," she began, her tone steady despite the storm raging inside her. "Maggie Collins didn't disappear by choice. She was betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect her." Grayson stiffened, his jaw tightening. "Evelyn, whatever nonsense you're spouting—" "Don't interrupt me," Evelyn snapped, surprising even herself with the force of her words. "You've controlled this town long enough, Judge. It's time everyone knew what you did." She turned to the growing crowd, holding up Maggie's journal. "This is Maggie's voice, the voice you tried to bury. She wrote about how you manipulated her, how you used your position to groom her, to isolate her from anyone who might have helped her." Gasps rippled through the audience, but Evelyn pressed on. "And when she confronted you, with Dr. Lang no less, you panicked. You killed her, covered it up, and destroyed anyone who got too close to the truth." "No!" Judith cried, stepping forward. "It wasn't like that. It was an accident. We never meant—" "Save it, Judith," Evelyn interrupted coldly. "You had a chance to do the right thing, to report him, to save Maggie, but instead you chose your reputation over her life. And now everyone needs to know who you really are." By now the entire square had fallen silent. Dozens of shocked faces turned toward Evelyn, Judith, and Grayson. Cameras clicked as reporters jostled for position, drawn by the commotion. Word had spread quickly. Justice in this town might not come through the courts, but public exposure could be just as damning. Grayson's composure cracked, his mask of superiority slipping away. "You think this will change anything?" he spat, glaring at Evelyn. "Do you honestly believe these people care about some girl who vanished 30 years ago? They'll forget about her the moment the headlines fade." "You're wrong," Evelyn said firmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "They won't forget. Not this time." She turned back to the crowd, raising her voice so everyone could hear. "For years, we've lived under the shadow of lies, lies perpetuated by men like Harold Grayson, who abuse their power and expect us to look the other way. But Maggie's voice won't be silenced anymore. Her pain deserves to be heard, and her story deserves to be told." A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd, emboldened by Evelyn's words. Someone shouted, "Shame!" Another voice joined in, then another, until the chant grew louder, echoing off the courthouse walls. Grayson's face flushed red with rage and humiliation. He opened his mouth to protest, but the weight of collective judgment bore down on him. Slowly he turned and walked away, his head bowed, the illusion of invincibility shattered. Judith collapsed onto the bench, sobbing openly as the crowd closed in around her. A deputy approached cautiously, likely intending to escort her somewhere safer, or perhaps to begin questioning her, but Evelyn doubted she'd ever recover from the shame of this day. As the scene unfolded, Evelyn stepped back, clutching Maggie's bracelet in her fist. Justice hadn't come in the form of handcuffs or prison sentences. It rarely did in towns like this. But it had come nonetheless. Grayson's career was over, his reputation ruined. Judith would likely vanish from public life entirely, and Maggie's name would finally mean something more than a tragic footnote in the annals of local history. Lena appeared beside Evelyn, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. "You gave her a voice." Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Not mine," she whispered. "Hers." Together they watched as the crowd dispersed, carrying fragments of Maggie's story with them. Somewhere deep inside, Evelyn hoped that maybe, just maybe, Maggie could rest now. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden light across the small gathering at the edge of town. A modest memorial had been erected, a simple wooden plaque bearing Maggie's name, surrounded by wildflowers and flickering candles. It wasn't grand or official, but it was something real. Evelyn stood before the crowd, her hands trembling slightly as she held a single sheet of paper. On it was written Maggie's final poem, discovered tucked inside the leather-bound journal they'd unearthed beneath Paul Delaney's barn. The words were raw, achingly beautiful, and hauntingly prescient, like a last whisper from beyond the grave. Lena sat nearby, her presence a quiet anchor for Evelyn. Around them, townsfolk who had once turned their backs on Maggie's memory now listened intently, their faces etched with sorrow and regret. Even those who hadn't known Maggie personally had come to bear witness, to acknowledge the life that had been lost and the truths that had been buried for far too long. Evelyn cleared her throat, steadying herself before beginning to read. "When shadows fall and voices fade, I'll linger still, though I'm afraid. Of all the lies, the truths untold, a story whispered, bold yet cold. They took my voice, my fleeting spark, and left me here adrift in dark. But hear me now through wind and rain. My echoes call again, again. Do not forget what came to pass, for silence feeds the sins amassed. Speak my name, let justice sing, and give my ghost a place to cling." Her voice broke on the final lines, tears streaming down her cheeks. For a moment there was only silence, the kind of profound stillness that follows truth laid bare. Then, one by one, people began to clap softly, their applause building into a wave of shared grief and gratitude. As the sound faded, Lena stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on Evelyn's arm. "That was beautiful," she murmured. "Maggie would have loved it." Evelyn nodded, wiping her eyes. "It's what she deserved. All along, she just wanted someone to listen." Later, as the crowd dispersed and the candles burned low, Lena lingered beside Evelyn. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "we should publish Maggie's writings, her poems, her letters, all of it. Let her voice reach farther than this town." Evelyn looked at her, startled by the suggestion. "A book? Why not?" Lena replied with a soft smile. She had so much to say, even if no one heard her at the time. Turning her words into a collection, it could be her legacy, a way to honor her courage, her talent. The idea struck Evelyn like a bittersweet chord. Maggie's voice, so often stifled, ignored, silenced, could finally break free. Not as a victim defined solely by tragedy, but as a writer, a dreamer, a fighter. Someone worth remembering. "I think she'd like that," Evelyn said after a pause, her voice thick with emotion. She always wanted to be seen. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn threw herself into the project, working closely with Lena to compile Maggie's writings. Each page felt like a gift, a glimpse into the mind and heart of a girl who had been robbed of her future. As they pieced together the manuscript, Evelyn found solace in the process. For the first time in years, she felt purpose, not just in uncovering the truth, but in ensuring Maggie's story endured. When the book was finally published, its title chosen from one of Maggie's own lines, Echoes Call Again, it resonated far beyond the borders of their small town. Readers wrote letters praising Maggie's bravery and talent, vowing never to let such injustices go unnoticed. Teachers included her work in classrooms, using it to spark conversations about abuse, power, and the importance of speaking out. Through it all, Evelyn found peace, not because the pain of loss had disappeared, but because she knew Maggie's voice would live on. In every poem, every letter, every word printed on the page, Maggie's spirit endured, a testament to the strength of someone who refused to be forgotten. One evening, as Evelyn sat alone in her living room, she picked up Maggie's bracelet and held it close. The metal was cool against her skin, a tangible reminder of the journey she'd undertaken. She smiled faintly, imagining Maggie somewhere, watching over her. "You did it," Evelyn whispered, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "You made them see you." And for the first time in decades, Evelyn Harper slept soundly, knowing she had given Maggie Collins the legacy she deserved.